Good morning, everyone. This is panel 5 of the eceee Summer Study on Energy Efficiency. Today, we will talk about local energy systems and the influence of our behaviors. My name is Cedric de Peut. I'm your panel leader of today, and I do it together with my friend Marcus Fritz from Fraunhofer, who will look after your questions. You can always place your questions in the chat uh, on HOVA. Please do it. We will have time to do some Q&A after every part, and at the end, maybe if we have some minutes, we do some more questions. Uh, Maybe I'll talk 1 minute about a very important situation in Belgium, in Flanders, where I'm from. Yesterday, we had the big day of announcing a climate pact between the government of Flanders and the cities and municipalities. I work for Association of Cities and Municipalities in Flanders, and so we have announced the pact. So Flanders gives some money to cities and municipalities, and we agreed on 4 topics. We will work on concrete action to mitigation topics on energy and on mobility, and to adaptation topics on planting trees and also on water. So yesterday I couldn't be at this summer study, but it was a very important day in Flanders. But today I'm with you, and we have 4 speakers. First, we go to Israel, to nearly Tel Aviv. We have there Elad Shaviv. He's executive director of the Israeli Energy Innovations Community at the Ben Gurion University. He will present live, and his topic goes about roles and motivations of potential new stakeholders in the evolving decentralized electricity system. An exploratory forward-looking perspective survey. Elad, you have the floor. Here you are.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present at eceee. Just let me know if you can see my slides. Oh.
Yeah, everything fine.
Okay, great. So as mentioned, the study is about roles and motivations of potential new stakeholders in the evolving decentralized electricity system. And I would like to acknowledge also the co-authors, Professor Yael Parag, Dr. Shiri Tzemach Shamir, and Dr. Naama Teshna. When we look on the topic of all this session, which is smart new start for sustainable communities, typically people would look on decentralized electricity as a really great opportunity for a smart new start for such communities. But we need to ensure that the governance, when we move ahead with decentralized electricity systems, can really serve this important goals. So when we're looking on smart communities, of course, there is great opportunity with decentralized electricity systems because they provide a lot of control which can be integrated with the smart city. When we look on sustainability, we can look on different elements of sustainability. It's an environmental, it is sustainability of energy supply, sustainability of social equity, and distributed energy electricity systems can contribute to all if we just ensure that we address it correctly. So for this, we did this study to look on what are the perspectives of the roles and motivations of potential new stakeholders in these evolving DES systems. We we defined three classes: traditional actors, which are the current actors or the legacy actors; emerging actors, which are new actors but that are already engaged with the market; and future actors, which we still are not sure who will be and what their role would be, but very important for us to understand if there are going to be any new actors, what the roles would be, and what are the motivations. So looking on the findings, first of all, I'll just have here a few highlights. The first one is a definite perspective that the distributed energy system is going to be a multiplayer market. You can see here the blue and the orange presents the strongly agree or somewhat agree to the question if this type of actor would play a significant role in the future distributed energy system. And you can see that even though there are some differences, all of them received pretty high confidence that they're going to play a significant role. Now, if we drill down into into the specific actors in each class, we go into this diagram. So the first one was just a consolidated information from all those. And this actually presents a very interesting perspective. I've marked here number 1, 2, and 3 of those that received an agreement that they are going to play a significant role in the future desk market. And you can see that actually the one that is being most confident that they are going to play a significant role are the smart buildings and homes operators or smart city operators you can see here. So those are future. And the second one is also companies providing building operational services. So we see that even though as classes, there is more or less unanimity between the different classes, but future actors, and especially those, the smart buildings and home operators, are believed to play the most significant role in the future desk market. Another very interesting finding was when we asked, whom do you estimate will be the most influential actor in the desk market? You can see that the traditional actors, which means the distribution, the power utilities, the DSOs, the DNOs, are going to lose most of their influence. So they are the least influential actor in the future desk market. When we looked on roles, so I'm highlighting here several interesting factors. Actors in the transportation industry are believed to hold a lot of strong role in the infrastructure, which is the green one. If we go to the bottom of the screen, database services companies like Google, Amazon are going to be very active in the database services. But if you remember that smart buildings operators or smart city operators are the ones that are mostly believed to be mostly significant in the future desk market, they are going to take most of their activity in different type of services. So it might be local site energy retailer, or it might be energy trade between local and other sites, or database services. But this means that those, we see here some distinguishment between infrastructure and services. When we looked on the motivation of the future actors, so not really surprising, the financial profits came up as the most important motivation. But when we look on specific actors, there is some interesting highlights here. So municipalities, for them, the most important one is cleaner environment. Oh, by the way, if we go back, you can see that actually cleaner environment is typically the least important motivation. But for cities, it is the most important motivation. Database services is the most important motivation for database services companies. And for the smart building operators that we said are going to be the most significant player, financial is very important, but followed very closely by improved service or energy-related added value to tenants and customers. So we can see that the different players or different actors are going to have different motivations and different roles. And those are very important when we come to look on the governance that is required. I think the last important highlight here is we ask also the respondents, do they believe that in the future there is going to be a convergence between the different providers of different infrastructure services like energy, telecommunications, smart home, electric vehicles, etc. Whereas about half of the respondents said that they don't expect such convergence, over a third said that they do expect such convergence, and about 15-16% said that they are not sure. So if we look at all those findings together, we can estimate that the decentralized electricity system is expected to migrate from a market of specialist actors as we have today. So when we're talking about specialist actors, we talk about actors that energy is the main, it's the core business of their operations. Never mind what type of energy, never mind if they are traditional or emerging, but most of their focus is on type of energy services. So we expect a migration from this type to a market that include also a variety of horizontal service operators, which means all kind of actors that have a different core business and that energy is just part of their business. And those might be transportation actors, smart city operators, database services, etc. We know, as written here, very difficult to predict, especially the future, but there was a pretty uh, common agreement on that fact. And even though traditional actors are still expected to remain active, but they would be less influential, and the smart city buildings home operators, which are believed to become very active, especially on the services side, and have different motivations than the current, or at least some of the current actors. And we also see that an environmental sustainability will not be top of mind for future actors. So this means that if we want to ensure that the distributed energy systems are really a good starting point for a smart and sustainable community, we need to first of all understand the functional implications of those changes. And most of those functional implications may have pros and cons. It all depends on how we play with it. For example, granularity. As a horizontal actor, there is an ability to include all kinds of appliances, different processes that are not directly related to energy with the energy operations. So this can bring a lot of value. There is a wider control span. For example, it can contribute to gain information gathered from other systems and then also have control on different systems. For example, transportation, getting information from electric vehicles and maybe even from smart homes. On the other hand, we do expect those actors to be less specialized, which means that it may require different systems and operational structure. If any of you tried to work with all kind of energy management systems, you have to be an electrical engineer in order to understand that. If we are talking about smart home or smart city operator, they may not be that skilled as specific energy operators, and also they are going to run all kind of different technical systems. So we need to have an interface between the different systems and to address different operators with different motivation and different skills. Another very important thing is the tenant's empowerment. Now, it may increase the tenant empowerment because they're going to have horizontal actors supporting them and getting them the best energy services. On the other hand, they may depend on those horizontal actors and may lose a bit of their empowerment because they have actors that provide them multiple services. And the last point here, which is very, very important, is new competitive landscape. Because if today most of the energy actors are competing on energy services, here energy might become just an add-on, and actually the competition would be on something else. Some actors may decide to subsidize energy. Some actors, on the other hand, may decide to take high prices, premium prices, because they provide everything. And all those very important functional implications needs to be taken into account when we look on governance and policies. First of all, on standards. So if today energy standards are in many cases sort of standalone, we need to ensure intercorrelation between standards of different domains. So the building, transportations, with special attention to functional beside the technical standard directives. The other thing, which very much relates to smart cities operation, is either municipal or national department organization and planning. Today, in most municipalities and communities, they have departments that work in silo. Now we are going to have new actors that may not liaise with the energy department, and they may liaise with the building department or other departments. So we need to ensure that there is some cross-departmental governance to ensure that the energy service is still being provided and that it contributes to the goals of the municipality or the national goals. Then customer rights. Once we start to have horizontal service providers, we might have an unfair advantage that they would take compared to energy providers. We've all are familiar with different examples, like for example, when Microsoft entered or Google or Amazon entered different segments. So we might find the same here, and we have to ensure that customers do get the right for a fair service, even though they are being served by horizontal actors that have a lot of power over them. And that also relates to another important issue, which is information flow and privacy. And we're looking here both on things like fraud, like privacy and operational concerns. Once we have a single point of contact that have all the information, it's become very risky. It provides a lot of advantages, but a lot of caution has to be provided to protect all this data. And the last point here is the flexibility over efficiency. We remember that we want to have a sustainable city. And in many cases, when we talk about horizontal actors, they may be biased toward more flexibility in their operations over efficiency. So to sum it all up, there is great opportunity, especially with these new horizontal actors, to really support a smart and sustainable community. But we need to understand that they are going to have a bit of a different mode of operation. They're going to be significant. They're going to focus on services. And in order to ensure that they really contribute to the smart and sustainable community, all kind of governance and policies need to be in place to ensure everything goes together. So thank you very much. I hope that I'm just on time. That would conclude the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ilat, for being on time. We have one question from Tina Fawcett. She asks you, Ilat, on your motivation data. This is reporting the perceptions of motivations by all of your respondents, not motivations reported by those actors themselves. There is evidence showing that people outside business rate profit seeking as a higher motive than business owners themselves report. Do you think, Ilat, this could be a factor in your results?
Absolutely, and this is a great question. And actually, this research will serve as a starting point for further researches. And that's one of the points, is really to talk to those potential future actors as well. One of the challenges, and we try to approach various future actors, one of the challenges is that many of the future actors still don't understand the market structure and are not really sure about their roles in that, but you're absolutely right, and it needs to be further validated, yes.
Thank you. I have one question from myself to you, Ilat. Do you think there is a role as an energy entrepreneur for the cities and the communities themselves, maybe together with the citizens?
Absolutely. I'm actually engaged with several entrepreneurships just like this. I think that, yes, they are missing an opportunity right now because there are a lot of private entities getting in. I think that as communities or municipalities have inherent advantages over private entrepreneurs because they have access to all the tenants of the city, and they have also their own resources, which is pretty significant. And I think that we will see more and more of those getting in, yes, and there are great opportunities.
Thank you so much, Ilat. I repeat, if you have questions, place them in Hova at the Q&A. We pick some questions at the end of every paper, but all of the persons are online, so you can ask your questions also in the chat. It could be a very interesting discussion. Now we go to England, the UK, at the University of Oxford. We have there Nick Banks. He is a postdoctoral researcher in local energy systems at the Environmental Change Institute of Oxford. His paper goes about a capability approach to smart local energy systems, aiming for smart and fair. Nick Banks, thanks that you are here. You have the floor.
Hi, my name's Nick Banks, and I'm going to be talking to you about using a capability approach to understand participation in smart local energy systems and the degree to which you need certain capabilities to access the benefits of smart local energy systems, and what that approach can usefully tell us about issues of energy equity and fairness. The paper was written by myself and Sarah Darby, and we're both researchers at the Environmental Change Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford. So our interest in this capability approach has come through our involvement with Project LEO, which is a major smart grid project funded by the UK government going on in Oxfordshire. It's got a couple of years left to run. And what we're interested in answering in Project LEO is essentially three main questions. So what are the technological, market and social conditions required to create a thriving and replicable smart local energy system? And how can we create that smart local energy system in such a way that it's both effective in keeping the lights on, but also delivers social environmental benefits? And thirdly, and this is the topic of this paper, how can we ensure that those benefits are distributed equitably and fairly? So just a note on what we mean by smart local energy systems. For Project LEO, they are a techno-economic and social response to the challenges of increasing electrification of heat and transport and increasing amounts of renewable generation connected at the low voltage level, which is creating various issues with managing the network. And they usually work in partnership with or associated with local energy markets, which are set up to trade and procure energy services, which can, in theory, tackle those network constraints, and which also, in the process of doing that, should deliver a host of environmental, social, and economic benefits. So when it comes to thinking about participating in smart local energy systems and accessing the benefits that they can bring, that comes down to two interrelated questions, really. What are the technologies, capabilities, capacities that actors need to participate? And how are those capabilities and capacities distributed across society? Is there a danger that some groups, because of their capability profile, are less able to participate or access the benefits of a smart local energy system? So thinking a bit more about what we mean by capability, this has been theorized in various ways. And the framework that we are starting with in LEO has been developed by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and they call it their capability lens. And this is applied at the actor level, at the household level. It's a way of thinking about capability at the householder level. And they have come up with 5 different domains of capability. First is dwelling and local area, so that refers to the technical ability of your house to accommodate a flexible technology, a solar panel or a battery, whatever it might be. Energy, tech and usage refers to the appliances and technologies within the home, so smart fridges, smart appliances, smart storage heating systems, and also the smart meter. Financial capability refers to the ability of the household to afford to pay for systems. Often these systems come at a premium, and so you need some financial resources to either take a loan or to pay for these systems outright. Personal and social capability refers to the ability of the household to change its energy demand profile in such a way that doesn't cause sort of detriment to the household, and in such a way that they can make best use of the flexible technologies that they have installed in their home. It also refers to their awareness and knowledge of how to use these systems. And then digital tech readiness, that refers to the connectivity of the home and the comfort and ease with which residents are able to use digital products and digital technologies. So we can also think about capability in terms of sector. And so in the paper, we talk about 3 domains of capability in this sort of sense. So firstly, actor capability. So that's the capability that is accrued around an individual household or a business or an organization. That's actor capability. Community capability is something different. So that's the kind of set of capabilities that emerge when individuals come together and act collectively. And it's closely linked to the idea of social capital. So a community with a lot of social capital will be a community where the actors, the individual actors in that community, talk to each other. They have lots of social relationships with one another, and they're able to sort of act collectively. And that would allow you, for example, to collectively lobby for a community-owned asset to be installed in your community, if you have that kind of social capital. And then system capability. So this is a 3rd level of capability. So this refers really to the policy and regulatory context that embeds all of these decisions about smart local energy systems, and the degree to which this policy and regulation is friendly for the kinds of market mechanisms and business propositions and value propositions that we want to encourage in a smart local energy system. So also into that system capability box, you could think about market actors, for example. So does your system have a market platform where flexibility can be traded and procured? And does it have actors like aggregators, asset owners that can organize themselves to sell their flexibility on that platform? So those are kind of attributes of the system as a whole. So there are lots of technologies that can be used to provide flexibility. 2 of those that we're particularly interested in looking at in LEO are vehicle-to-grid technologies and demand-side response at the grid edge. So thinking about the required capabilities to adopt and get the best out of these different flexibility technologies. We haven't got time to go through all of them here, but just to give you a flavour. So let's take vehicle to grid first. So at the actor level, you need to be able to change your driving patterns or your lifestyle so that can fit around the optimal charge and discharge cycles for vehicle to grid. So ideally you need to have your car back at home, connected to the charge point at around 4 o'clock, so that the battery can discharge into the local grid at peak time. That way you'll be able to optimize the revenue that you can get from the system. At the community level, we know that a strongly socially network community is much more likely to be able to engage with the planning system and, for example, lobby for the installation of a publicly accessible vehicle-to-grid charge point. At the system level, vehicle-to-grid is greatly facilitated when you have aggregators operating in the local energy system that can take all the flexibility provided by each of those vehicle-to-grid vehicles and sell that flexibility into a local energy market or even a national energy market. That's also possible. That will maximize the revenues that you can achieve. So you need aggregators in the system. For small-scale DSR, the technologies required are quite expensive. Solar roof, batteries, smart appliances, they're more expensive than conventional alternatives. So actors need to have sufficient economic resources to afford these technologies. At the community level, a strongly socially networked community is much more likely to adopt an energy innovation. Some very interesting work has shown that, where a well-networked community is 4 times more likely to adopt an energy innovation than a less well-networked community. And just as with V2G, small-scale DSR, you need a system which allows an aggregator to operate with a business model which minimizes transaction costs and is able to collect all of these small slivers of flexibility and sell them into a local market platform. So now thinking about how these different kinds of capabilities are distributed and what that means for energy equity. So at the actor level, as I've said, behind the meter technologies are relatively expensive. The graph on the right shows the ownership of electric vehicles by income decile, and hopefully you can see there that around 50% of the electric vehicles, at least in 2019, were owned by just the top 2 income deciles. Equally, to have a heat pump that can operate effectively, you need a well-constructed building with good fabric insulation standards, and there's a good chance that that kind of home is more likely to be owned by high-income groups. Older households are less tech savvy. This is just a fact of life, and so you know, there's an argument there that older households will be less likely to be able to participate in these sort of smart systems and be comfortable in participating in these sort of smart digital systems that lie at the heart of smart local energy systems. And households in poor quality housing and with medical conditions are also less likely to be able to shift their energy demand without detriment in some way, if they're going to sort of achieve the benefits that could bring in a smart local energy system shifting of demand. So a source of energy inequity there. And at the community level, very low income communities, we know, have been found to have less dense social networks, less what they call bonding social capital. And as I've mentioned, that can affect the degree to which energy innovations diffuse through a community. And low-income communities are likewise less engaged in local planning and policy processes. So that could impact, for example, the ability of the community to lobby for community-owned and operated smart energy assets. So in conclusion, it should come as no surprise really that capability to participate in a smart local energy system and in associated local energy markets will be more prevalent in some communities than others. In general, higher income communities in better housing and with higher levels of social capital will be better able to participate in a smart local energy system. So that does lead us to the question of how we then take that information and turn it into policy interventions. And we need to ask really, what is the right response to instances of potential inequity given this capability approach? Do we improve capability? Do we provide more income, for example, to a low-income community? Greater levels of awareness of the benefits of smart local energy systems? Or do we come at it from the other direction, and do we adapt the smart local energy system offer so that it matches the capabilities that we find within that community? It may be, though, that neither of those approaches is kind of feasible because of the resources required to achieve them. The transaction costs may just be simply too great. And so in that instance, we need to find other ways to allow low-income communities to benefit from the smart local energy system offer. So that's all I've got time to talk about right now. And I believe we've got a few minutes for questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Nick, for this interesting lecture. I have one question. At the one hand, the system is and the energy system is very complex, but how can we make it as simple as possible? Keep it simple, and I think if we keep it simple, we also can include everyone. We couldn't afford to leave someone behind in the new energy system. How can we make it as simple as possible?
How do we make the energy system as simple as possible? That's quite a question, Cedric. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it is possible to simplify something that is inherently very, very complex. I mean, I suppose the way to simplify it is to understand that it's a socio-technical system, and to sort of take that as your starting point, really, that you're dealing with a system that has developed where people and organizations and infrastructure has kind of evolved together. And so that if you want to kind of influence that system to develop in a new direction, you have to attack it from both the social dimension and also the technical dimension. And so I would say that you need to sort of break it down. You need to use an analytic lens, something along the lines of what I've presented, which sees the system as a kind of, as a set of capabilities that accrue around certain domains within the system. So individual actors, that would include businesses and organizations and householders, but also at the community level, where an actor, a bunch of individual actors can come together and have an influence in the energy system. And then finally, the overall system itself in terms of the rules of the market, governance, and so on. And so I think in order to simplify the system, you need to basically understand it accurately. And I think this is where this capability approach offers a useful way forward.
Thank you. In the chat, you might see a question from Jake Barnes. Nick, which do you see as being more flexible or receptive to being changed? Actors' capabilities for the system. This might be the first part of answer to your last site.
Actors' capabilities or the smart local energy system. Well, Okay, so Jake, if I understand your question, are you saying that you should be attempting to change the kind of the governance and the infrastructure? Is that the sort of route to changing the system, or is it about changing individual actor capabilities? I think some actor capabilities are going to be a real challenge to change. Sort of improving, as I've said in the paper, you know, the sort of capabilities of low income and vulnerable groups so that they can participate in a smart local energy system is going to be difficult. And you're going to need particular interventions to ensure that those groups aren't left behind in the energy transition. Because it is essentially, this system is essentially, you know, it is creating 1,000 new ways for people to be left behind. The energy transition is it's a free market capitalist system in many ways that needs policy interventions to ensure that, you know, new pockets of vulnerability and unfairness aren't created. So I don't really know how to answer your question. I think you need to attack it from both directions. You need to improve actor capabilities, and you need to improve system capabilities as well to ensure that the system doesn't generate unfair outcomes.
There is one last question from John Rowlett. We don't have a lot of time, and I will rephrase it in my own words. Maybe you can chat with John after this Q&A. But just short, do you think we must choose for electricity and for heat nets instead of what we call green gases and green liquids?
So are you asking if there's a sort of a better choice between, I suppose, working with the existing infrastructure or changing to electricity?
Yes. What should we choose as a government? Should we radically choose for electricity and heat nets, or should we still choose for green gases and green liquids and so
on? Well, I think probably certain parts of the network, it might make sense to work with, you know, green gas and you know, perhaps even hydrogen and so on. But in other parts of the network, it probably makes more sense to switch energy vectors over to electricity. And I think probably in general terms, the kind of the basic physics, especially if you've got a lot of renewables on your in your supply mix, it means it makes more sense, I think, probably in environmental terms, to switch over to electricity as your sort of main heat and transport vector.
Okay, thank you very much. I suggest you to have the discussion further on the chat. May I ask to the next two speakers to switch on their video for a moment, so I'm sure you're on line. Because I haven't spoken before with the next speaker, Chandana Shashidharan, if I call your name correctly. She's a principal research associate for the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. You're there. Thank you, Chandana. You will talk about the role of demand response in India's energy future. Chandana, I give you the floor.
Hi everyone, my name is Chandana. I am from Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE. We are a think tank based in Delhi which works on energy efficiency. And today I'm here to present our paper on the role of demand response in India's energy. What we will go through today is on how India's power outlook look like, how is demand response defined in India, what has an Indian experience with demand response, and we'll demonstrate a case study showing the value proposition from demand response, and finally we will come to the discussion and Most of you already know, India is actually experiencing decarbonization, and we're going to add a huge amount of renewable energy into our system. We're adding it right now, and we're going to add more in future. But on the other hand, if I look at generation that is going to happen in 2030, at least almost 54% of my energy is actually going to come from coal and lignite as the sources, even though we are going to add a huge amount of solar into the system. On the other end, on the demand side, the demand levels are actually going to increase because of the uptake of EVs, as well as increase of space cooling requirements and increase in building stock. We're also going to experience a huge penetration in the distributed energy resources, as well as our peak demand is almost going to double by 2030. This will mean that since the network is designed on peak capacity, our network capacity needs to be augmented significantly by 2030. Next section, we'll get into definition of demand response. So most of popular definition of demand response is probably from USA, wherein it is said that demand response is actually a response in change in price of electricity or incentive over the time. CERs in India has also tried to adopt a definition which is not quite popular actually, in fact, but you know, the use case that is designed by CRC is quite restrictive. This is the central regulator for India, and it is actually intended surrounded around frequency response or congestion charges. The definition actually varies on applicability. So if I look at the FERC definition, there is actually a wide range of benefits that are actually covered, whereas the CERC definition is a little restrictive. So the question is that can the existing definition actually help realize all the value proposition from DR as a resource? We don't believe so, because we feel there is a huge value proposition from DR in reducing the cost of supply, saving credit investment, supporting reliable operation, and even assisting in the emissions reduction, which cannot be recognized. There could be multiple types of DR. There are multiple classifications. This is a classification that we have adopted at AAA to make things similar for us. So our range starts from what is a behavioral intervention, where it's actually based on awareness, to a tariff-enabled DR, where to a manual DR with incentives, to automatic DR, where the focus is actually on demand reduction, and what we call as flex DR, which is not just reduction of demand, it's actually increase of demand as well. This is particularly relevant if you're dealing with a high renewable energy generation scenario, wherein your best mandate could be for you to actually increase your demand. Like this demand could be even demand. What is the current Indian experience with demand response so far? That's what I'm going to talk about next. So we had a lot of trials. So we were able to study and present some of the major trials that are available. So there is like a lack of literature on surrounding all the trials in India. So what we talk about is the first trial that actually happened in 2014. If you look at it, it was actually automated demand response, and they were focusing on peak demand and grid stress management. Again, in peak demand was the target for the both of the initial programs in India. And then subsequently, what the trial that actually happened in Rajasthan, this was different because the focus was actually deviation from, the schedule. That is actually when you, what the DISCOMs are supposed to fix a schedule, and when they deviate from their schedule, they have a huge penalty. This is actually could be like a proxy for frequency regulation in India, and that has been the value proposition that is explored by two trials, that is the Delhi and the Rajasthan trial, and both of them actually tried with manual DR with energy market integration. And one of the latest trial that was done in UP, which is actually a state which experiences a peak deficit situation, was actually manual DR. But what we see is that most of these programs are mostly focused on commercial and industrial users, and residential has been largely left out from the window. And what we have are only pilot programs, and the scaling up is actually quite less in India at this. So what are the key learnings for India from the pilots? One is that the current regulatory definition of DER kind of limits the value proposition, and there is actually an ability to pass on any additional cost of procurement. We'll discuss it when we come to the recommendations in the end. So I'll just touch upon these and we'll discuss in detail later. And people were unable to convince the regulators for scaling up. That is what happened. So we realized that there is a need for performance-based regulation that needs to happen. Since the tariff was too low in itself, the incentive was not much. So 10% of 2 rupees and 10% of 20 rupees is actually really different, right? So for some of the consumers, the incentives were too less. And then again, there is this huge problem in India because tariff is really not reflective of the true cost. So, but even then, we could bring about some key recommendation that came from the trials in India. One is that cooling load is an ideal candidate for DR programs. Then the second recommendation that came is like you have left out the residential and agricultural category. Perhaps you could also design DR programs for all consumer categories. All the trials couldn't explore all the value propositions. We need to actually identify all value streams and benefits that would come from DR. Awareness is a huge challenge, and capacity building of stakeholders is going to be critical. And we need to define DR as a market instrument, especially because India has very progressive regulation when it comes to energy market lately. Moving, we will discuss a value proposition we want to demonstrate in front of you. This is to showcase DR as a method for emission reduction. So this is actually the load curve for a state in India. This is how the state load was in from April 19 to March 20. That is a financial year 2020. And this was the generation mix of the state. So you can actually see that even though the state has a huge amount of hydro, still the bulk of the load is actually being supplied by coal and lignite. The share of gas is quite less. The share of nuclear is really less. The share of solar and wind is actually, you can see it more towards the winter season than the summer season. That's the truth. And if you look at how the demand has varied over the months, you get a better picture. You can actually see that the demand in the summer months is quite higher than the demand in the winter months. But what actually gives you the best picture is the load duration curve that I have presented. So you can actually see that it's only 10% of the time that the load actually goes above 18.7 gigawatt. The rest of the year is going to remain very less, and that's what the load curve, the story that the load tells us. Continuing our analysis, we can actually see that when is the peak load occurring. So this is particularly critical when you're planning for demand response. So in this particular state, when we studied when is the peak load occurring, so you can actually see that 7 to 8 p.m. is actually the window when the state has seen a lot of peak demand. And then another important part is look at midnight, because this is actually coming from air conditioning. That is the factor surrounding that. So there are significant instances when the peak demand is actually occurring at midnight. And we saw this threshold of 18.5 gigawatts. So we checked how many times did the threshold violation happen and when did this happen. So that gives you this picture of why summer peak demand is very critical in India. So you can actually see it's in the summer. It's always in the summer. It's actually between May and July when these threshold violations have really happened in the state. And so what we try to do is, for the same load which was there in 2019-20, we didn't actually forecast it for future, even though it's going to change significantly in the future. We tried deploying a very minimal amount of DR, which is 2 to 2.5%, and we found out that how much energy. So this was actually a load shift DR, wherein we didn't just curtail the load, we actually shifted that load. We reduced from the peak demand to the time during the daytime when the state actually experience is very low load, and the state is actually adding a lot of renewable generation as well. So we believe this demand shift is quite possible. So we could do the valley filling, we could reduce the dependence of coal from this activity, we could actually reduce the curtailment from RE. We believe even though India has high amount of RE here, curtailment of RE is the sad picture of our story. We could reduce emissions and we could actually increase cost savings from DR, and the percentages you can actually see in front of the scheme, because for this case study we could see that there could be significant emission reduction potential also from DR. So while discuss, this is wherein we are coming to the heart of the problem in India. So what we feel is, in India, if we talk about shed, like this is not a solution, because discoms are financially not viable, and any loss of revenue is something they are not going to support. So what we do advise is, let's focus on shifting, because India can actually do it, because you're adding a lot of renewable energy and you can actually shift a lot of load during the high renewable energy generation. This could be agricultural load also, but that has a huge potential in uh, the reducing the peak demand. And another major thing that we need to say is, like, don't treat take one size fit all approach for DR. DR is actually a portfolio of options, and every consumer and every utility is going to have a different approach. So we need to design customized DR to study the demand pattern of consumer. And what is the supporting factor for this? The supporting factor for this is actually smart meters. India is investing significantly into the smart meter application, and if we can really tap into our smart meters for the DR, then we actually create win-win situation for consumers. And technology is so advanced right now that we are able to support residential DR with IoT, Wi-Fi, smartphone, and smart meters. We are able to do residential programs right now much cheaper than commercial and industrial. Regulatory changes are critical if we want to push DR in India. The current tariff structure is actually one of the major barriers, because it actually allows to pass on any uncontrolled cost, and that cost can be recovered in the upcoming financial year from the consumer. This means that even the utility is actually going to pay high amount of cost for the peak electricity, they still have this ability to recover it from the consumers. So you're not really creating any incentive for them. On the other hand, there is also a huge the cost of electricity is too less, so there is a lack of arbitrage, which is actually a deterrent for DR. And regulators are really working in a surplus ecosystem in India, and they're not prioritizing DR. So what's the solution that we are proposing? We are proposing performance-based regulations for DR in India. These could be regulatory changes that can allow discoms to have an incentive for adopting DR. There could be benchmarks set on operational financial parameters, and we believe that PPR with a price cap regime could be the right fit of India. And you can even start simply with capacity related incentives to minimize the network capacity upgrade, because India is going to experience significant demand, a high amount of that, as I explained, because our peak demand is going to. We feel that we need to allow aggregation. Currently, aggregation is not allowed, especially since a residential energy consumption is what we are unable to tap into. This would be critical, and with aggregation only, we will be able to expand value streams and even bid into our energy and ancillary markets. That's what we feel. And finally, we are doing very good with energy efficiency, especially at the appliance energy efficiency level, whereas discom is actually a designated consumer under under our schemes for to promote EE, and the discom actually has load reduction targets. So we actually have a window of opportunity to improve the profitability of DR with active consumer engagement, and this is where DR, including behavioral DR, where you can tap into consumers, need to be explained, and it's a rational choice for India. And finally, leave you with an acknowledgement. We have received inputs from AutoGrid India, and they have been critical for us to be able to execute this white paper. And thank you, everyone. I'm leaving my contacts here.
Thank you so much, Chandana, for your insights. I don't see any questions in the chat, so please, everyone, you can pose questions at the Q&A section of WOVA. Maybe one small question for me to you, Chandana. You aimed at tariffs and true costs are different. So do you think it would be better that the tariffs would be the same as the true costs?
Hi, I hope I'm audible. I will try to explain this. We are a country wherein electricity is as a concurrent subject. It is also an election-winning subject in India. Let me put it that way. That's why historically, agricultural as well as residential tariffs in India, in particular, has been very low. So, and we do have two types of subsidization that happens. One is a cross subsidization that happens because the industrial and commercial consumers have higher tariff than us, which is used to subsidize the residential and agricultural consumers. And on the second portion, government itself was supporting the discoms because they were unable to recover their cost. So that was the situation we had. Over the years, we are seeing a definite improvement, especially after 2003 Electricity Act, which also led way to privatization. So in India, the private discoms who have operated have been able to prove, and also there are some public sector discoms, they have also been performing really well. Why I explain the situation is this gives us a better option to understand this picture of cost to the real cost pricing. So right now, what is happening in India is like you would be hearing in the news that we are adding a lot of solar, which is really cheap. This is cheaper than thermal, which is somewhere around INR 3 per unit, in rupees 3 per unit. Now the solar is in 2.1 and even 2.5 rupees per unit. So we are seeing this huge reduction in generation cost. And even if I talk about the coal power plants, our target is that ultra mega power plants and supercritical power plants, which are mega plants, but their cost of power is also going to be the cheap. But because of the way the current tariff system is designed, there is a problem in the system because the cost is is not really linked to what is the cost of procurement. So because of those biases, that asymmetry, we still have a problem. So I believe that even government signal actually says so. In future, we might reach a situation where our tariffs are truly cost reflective in nature. And then again, we are a different sort of a country because we have still not peaked in our emissions. Our demand is going to increase significantly in the future. For that purpose also, I believe it is important that our cost of electricity should be truly reflective of, of all the cost elements that are adding to it, including the cost of emissions.
Thank you, Chandana. Marcus, my friend, if you hear this lecture, how is it in Germany? And can you learn in Germany something about the system in India?
To be honest, I'm not so much into the electricity system in Germany. So yeah, I would only could say some thoughts about it, but yeah, I don't think that's really helpful now.
Okay, do you have one question for Chandana?
No, we have no further questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Then we move on to Sweden. There we have Arti. I can say this, the rest of her name I will ask herself to pronounce it because it's a very difficult name. She is a postdoctoral researcher at the Linnaeus University in Växjö of Sweden. I asked lately to her if it was very hot at this time because it's important for her topic. Her topic is analysis of influence and land use, land cover changes of the land surface temperature of Växjö municipality in Sweden. Arti, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. This is Aarti Aishwarya, a postdoctoral researcher from Linnaeus University, Sweden, and now I will be presenting you all our research work titled Analysis of Influence of Land Use Land Cover Changes on the Land Surface Temperature of Växjö Municipality, Sweden. So before I actually get into the research topic, I would like to say in brief about the research background. Human-induced activities known as the anthropogenic activities are responsible for most of our land use land cover changes all around the world, which results in depletion of our natural resources, say vegetation, water bodies, and thereby increasing the heat emissions from the Earth's surface. So some of the major factors, say increase in urbanization, which results in clearing up of most of our agricultural lands, farmlands, to accommodate this increasing built-up areas, and rapid increase in industries and change in agricultural practices are all responsible for this climatic changes, be it at local level, regional level, ultimately impacting the climate change at a global level. So nowadays, LST, that is land surface temperature, is widely used and then recognized as a measure to evaluate this changing climatic conditions, especially in urban areas. And also with the availability of high resolution satellite imageries and then the advancements in GIS techniques, this estimation of LSD becomes highly reliable and is widely used in the climate change studies. So the actual motivation for the research comes from the fact that numerous studies have been focused on analyzing the impact of land use land cover changes on the land surface temperature. And in this context, I would like to cite a couple of them. In the year 2019, a research has been reported where the authors tried to study the impact of changing land use patterns on the land surface temperature in lower Himalayan region of Pakistan through cellular automata model. And based on this land use land cover change analysis between 1987 and then 2017, the future urban trend and then its corresponding land surface temperature was simulated, say in the year 2032 and then 2047. Similar study was also done in the year 2017, where the authors identified the impact of land use land cover changes on the land surface temperature of a metropolitan region in Zimbabwe. So when we come to the European context, ever since the pre-industrialization year of 1850, the highest temperature ever recorded in Europe was 2014, followed by 2015 and then 2016. So this highest ever temperature recorded in 2014 was mainly almost 80% because of human induced land use land cover changes as per the European Environmental Agency report. So in this context, I would like to emphasize the fact that not much studies or research has been focused on analyzing this impact of land use land cover changes on the surface temperature of Växjö municipality in Sweden, making use of Landsat imageries and then the cellular automata model. So with this research background and then this motivation, the objectives for this research are defined, which is to analyze the impact of land use land cover changes on the land surface temperature of Växjö municipality in Sweden between 2014 and then 2020, making use of Landsat imageries, and then further to simulate the urban development and then the land surface temperature, say in 2050, making use of cellular automata based model, and then to check to study if there is any seasonal variations in the relationship between LST and then the vegetation index NDVI, and LST and the built-up index NDVI in the metropolitan region through regression analysis. So the methodological framework adopted to carry out these objectives is given here. So where we have the Landsat imageries of all the 4 years, and then making use of these Landsat imageries, the land cover maps were prepared. So the land cover maps categorize the study region into 4 categories: built up, vegetation, water body, and open lands. Since the current study focused only on identifying the impact of human-induced land cover changes on LSD, the remaining categories, say water body, vegetation, and open lands, were merged into a single category termed non-built up. So now at this end of the process, we have the urban maps of all those 4 years, which had only two categories, that is built up and then non-built up. And from the thermal band of Landsat, that is a band 10 available, so we have estimated the land surface temperature of all those 4 years. So at this end of the process, we have the urban and then the land surface temperature maps of all those 4 years. So now comes the simulation part. So the simulation is based on a cellular automata model. CA model works on this concept. That is, if we want to study the urban trend, say in future, it is dependent on the urban scenario of the present and then the past. Say if we want to study the urban development in time T3, it is based on the urban development of time T1 and then T2. So based on this concept, the transition potential matrix between the time T1, that is 2014, and then time T2, 2020, was used to simulate the urban development in T3, that is 2050. As the name suggests, the transition potential matrix is nothing but a matrix which highlights how much area is expected to change from non-built up to built up between the given two time periods. And then based on this, the possible urban expansion in 2050 in the urban region, that is the metropolitan region, is calculated. And then the similar cellular automata based simulation technique was used to simulate the land surface temperature in 2050. And of course, to study the seasonal variation, different seasonal satellite imageries of the year 2019, say spring, summer, and autumn, were collected. And then the relationship between LST and then the vegetation index and then the built-up index were also calculated through regression analysis. And then the results of these analyses are given here. So where we have the urban maps of all the 4 years, say for example from A to B, and then these reddish patches are the ones we are interested in, which is nothing but the built-up areas. And as we could see, these patches were increasing from 2014 to 2020. And it was more concentrated in the central portion, which is nothing but the city center of the municipality. And it would be more interesting if we compare these urban maps with the surface temperature maps, where these blue areas are the ones where we had surface temperature is comparatively lower, and then the pinkish ones are the ones where the surface temperature is comparatively higher. So where there are reddish patches in the urban maps, the corresponding areas were comparatively hotter as depicted in the surface temperature maps. And we could say from this fact that as urban areas were increasing, the surface temperature area was also increasing. And then when we talk about the statistics of those maps, so we have the urban region increasing from 2014 to 2020 in the metropolitan region, in the municipality, which was increasing between 2014 and 2020, almost double the time between a time period of 6 years. And also there was an increase in the mean land surface temperature, which has been depicted here in degrees Celsius. And of course, we could see that there is a dip in this particular year, 2018. This was the year which had an abnormal climate changes. Say, for example, it had the warmest summer and then the coldest winter. So nevertheless, there was an double the time increase in the mean surface temperature between 2014 and then 2020 in the municipality. And the urban map of the possible expansion in 2050 based on the cellular automata modeling technique has been depicted here, where the pinkish ones are the possible expansion in the municipality in 2050. And this transition potential matrix based on which CA modeling was done is given here. And as we could see, it is observed that between 2040 and then 2020, almost 36 square kilometer of the region had converted from non-built up to built up. And based on this assumption, it is expected that almost 195 square kilometer of non-built up from 2020 may get urbanized in the region in 2050. So again, when it comes to the simulation of land surface temperature, so it has been observed that between 2014 and then 2020, the lower temperature regions, that is around 0 to 14 degrees Celsius, had dramatically went down to almost 5 square kilometer in 2020, and then which is expected to still go down in 2050 almost to 0.18 square kilometer. But whereas the hotter temperature regions of around 24 to 39 degrees Celsius was increasing between 2014 and then 2020, and then it is expected to still go further increase in 2050. So the seasonal variation in LSD and then the vegetation and then the built-up indices were also studied. And then as expected, there was a inverse relationship between LSD and then the vegetation index, meaning higher the vegetation in an area, lower would be the surface temperature, which is depicted in the figure A. And then this inverse relationship was predominant in summer, which is highlighted here. And there was a positive relationship between LSD and then the built-up index, that is higher the built-up areas, higher was the surface temperature. Again, its relationship was more profound in summer. And then between these two indices, built-up and then the vegetation, there was an inverse relationship. And then again, it was more predominant during the month of August of 2019. So to sum it up all, the municipality had underwent urban development between 2014 and then 2020, which was almost double the growth between a span of 6 years. And then based on the cellular automata model, it is expected that the municipality may develop 4 times as far as the urban development is considered in 2050. And then the land surface temperature, its mean value has increased almost 3.8 degrees Celsius between these 6 years. And based on the simulation analysis, the hotter regions of the municipality may increase up to 6 times in the year 2050. And then the seasonal influence study highlights the fact that there was an inverse relationship between LSD and then the vegetation index, and then a positive relationship between LSD and then the built-up index. So this kind of study would be interesting to the urban local planning authorities. So making into consideration of all these factors, so it would be appropriate for them when they make any planning strategies in the future, so as to mitigate the surface temperature effects in their urban regions. And also in this current study, only the satellite images are taken into account while making the modeling process. But whereas when agents or factors responsible for urbanization, say for example road networks, population density, and so on, if they are also taken into account, then the urbanization prediction, the trend patterns would have been much more realistic, and which would be considered in our future research activities. And always there is a dual relationship between this land use change and then the climate change. And this study has analyzed the impact of land use changes on the surface temperature, that is on the climate, but the reverse, that is how the change in climatic conditions would impact the land use patterns, would be interesting to study. And that would also be an integral part of our future research activities. And these are some of the references which I have cited within our presentations. And thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Cedric, I think your audio is not working.
Is it okay? No?
Now it's okay.
No, it's okay. Okay, thank you, Arti, for your presentation. What I was asking, have you talked your topic with the officials and policymakers of the city of Axio itself, and what could they do with it? Is it a solution for some rules on densification of the buildings in the center of Axio, maybe?
Actually, we have not yet communicated our results with the urban planning authorities, not at least for the time being. But actually, we made an attempt to study how this increase in this built-up areas in Weko municipality has impacted on this increase in this thermal environment of the municipality. So, of course, so we just wanted to study for the entire county level, And then to begin with, like kind of a pilot study, we made use of, with the limited data sets. Say, for example, we have made use of only a single time period data set of the satellite imageries. So probably if we take into account of the seasonal data sets, taking into account of all the temperature factors into the account, then it would have a better realistic presentation of the current scenario. So that's what we're planning, which has been represented in our future research activities. So that's our research plan for the time.
Arti, do you see something as a solution in green roofs and green walls?
Sorry, probably a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Cedric.
Yes.
I'm sorry, because there's some problem with my network here. So am I audible now?
Yes. Is there a solution on green roofs or green walls?
Not audible. Okay, just a second.
Arti, we can hear you.
Okay, so am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so sorry about it. There's some problem with my network connection today. Okay.
Okay, but I think you didn't hear the question. Is there a solution for green roofs?
Or green roofs and green walls. Yes, because now the surface temperature map, which we have estimated, is based on the satellite imageries. So which is based on just the solar radiations falling on the Earth's surface. But if we want to exactly study how this the green roofs and then the walls, including in our, then we have to go level at the building levels. So if we concentrate within the urban areas, the built up sectors within those urban areas, then it's like kind of narrowing down our studies. So right now we have not yet considered in that scale. So we have considered the entire built up area or the urban center as a level of our analysis. So of course, yes. So building level of analysis, considering these green roofs would be an interesting thing to do maybe in the future research activities of ours.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it could be interesting to call back to this meeting Ilat and Shaviv and Nick Banks. Are you still online? Ilat, know at this moment, I think the topic of Nick Banks could be very interesting for you in Israel. What have you learned from Nick, and what are your conclusions, and what can you do with it in Israel?
I think that thank you. I think that the issue of understanding the equality is very important, and we'll need to take these conclusions from this research here and see how really we can support the maybe less developed communities here. So I don't have anything that I can say immediately what we're going to do with this, but there are certainly several different communities which do not have sufficient or maybe adequate energy capabilities today. There is great potential to work with them actually with distributed generation. It's not a big issue in Israel to connect everyone to the grid, but still in some cases we did some analysis. In some cases it may be more cost effective to start with local generation, then afterwards to connect them to the grid. And I think that this is a very interesting point to look at.
Thank you. Nick, what did you learn about Ilat's lecture?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see, this broad range of actors that are starting to emerge, and particularly, I think you were suggesting, Elad, that there were these sort of actors that are kind of basically technology companies that can work right across the sector, and they work in lots of different domains, and not just energy. And so I suppose it's about ensuring that within this sort of within the new range of business models that are going to emerge, that there is space for actors like that who are prepared to work with these left behind communities and low income groups. And that may require, you know, business models that are not just solely around generating profit. There's such a thing as a community aggregator, for example, which is being explored. And that's an aggregator which is set up to provide, to take flexibility from actors within the community, but to not, and to turn that into benefit, to sell that flexibility into local markets, but to return the that financial benefit in a way that isn't solely about making the aggregator more profitable. It's designed to create community benefit rather than enrich a private enterprise. So I think there's, you know, lots of new ways of doing things that are beginning to emerge, and some of those will be able to kind of address this issue of kind of unfairness in the system, as long as we get the business models right.
Thank you.
I just say a comment because it relates actually very nice to the question, Cedric, that you've asked beforehand on the opportunities for municipalities or community managers to enter the market. Because if we look on those new business models, then maybe rather than just let the private entrepreneurs or private entities lead the market, where naturally they need to have financial motivations as either their single or almost single motivation, is to let those community managers and municipalities enter the market, understand the different opportunities, and then call on the private entities to get in, but ensure that still the private entities make their financial benefits, because otherwise we don't have a market, but they can probably, I wouldn't say manipulate, but govern their operations in a way that they ensure that also the community interests are in place. And that can be an interesting opportunity also for poor areas, because at the end of the day, when we go to different type of service providers, everyone provides services and they can make profits from every location. And then if we work correctly with it, everyone gains.
I fully agree with you. Thank you for that, Ilat. We have one question from Sarah Darby. She aims to the first three speakers, but Chandana, I will ask it to you. I wonder what you think about how best to develop the relationship between market actors in a smart homes, vehicles, cities, and regulated market with obligations to provide energy services to all. What do you think about that, Chandana?
I suppose I'm a firm believer that this decentralization trend in electricity is the bigger winner, because that is the pathway to democratize energy use. So, but unfortunately, I believe India is like maybe 4 to 5 steps behind. But we are on the right path, particularly because of the higher amount of renewables that we are adding. We are realizing that we need to act faster, and we cannot actually miss out on the train. So we are seeing a lot of decentralization efforts that are coming in right now. But as Dr. Elad and Nick was saying, the true power lies when communities can come together and sustain themselves in terms of energy. We are not there yet. Like if you look at our entire target, we have a huge target for solar rooftops. Right now, our ministry is also promoting solar rooftops with storage. But we are lagging way behind on the targets in that equation, particularly when we talk about the community. The residential is a huge adopter that can make a difference. We are seeing like people, commercial and industrial adoption that is happening, but on the small scale industries or the small scale commercial units and the small scale residents, there is still a barrier to that ecosystem. So, and electric vehicles are just picking up in India. Since I work in this ecosystem, I believe that if I take an electric two-wheeler in India, which could be the mainstay of electrification in India as well, that has the potential to be an equivalent of a home storage in India, given our consumption rate. In fact, the electric two-wheeler battery pack is much higher than the average battery pack for emergency backup in India. So even starting from a two-wheeler, definitely the electric cars, right now we are very low on penetration. We're only able to sell like 3,000 cars in a month. So we are very, very low on the number. But in the future, because we are seeing a lot of companies, including Tesla, wants to come in India. So given the penetration of energy storage, there are also community level storage that are coming up in India. So we truly believe this transition is faster. That being said, there are definite challenges, and there are definitely a large set of steps that we have to do. We have to change ourselves, but I believe that is the future for India as well.
Okay, thank you. I see we passed already 12 o'clock, but we had 5 minutes extra. So maybe I can switch to my friend Marcus to ask if he will pose from himself one last question, or maybe come to conclusions for this last nice session of the ECEE panel 5. Marcus?
Yeah, maybe just one remark to all of our speakers today. There are still some questions in the Q&A session on Hoover, so please go there and check out the questions, and maybe you can ask the questions there. And to all of our audience, feel free to get in touch with our speakers. I think they would be happy to get some feedback from you, or start a discussion. So you can do that. And maybe one last question to you, Arti, because I think that's a quite nice question from Hans Nielsen. He's asking, is there any hope for Vexure?
Is there any hope for? Please go on.
For Vexure.
For Vexure.
Yes.
That's
okay,
a very good and short answer. Thank you for that, Arti. We are very glad to have you with us. So maybe with this nice word of hope from Arti, we can come to conclude this session. Thank you all for your contribution. Thank you all for your insights. Hope to meet you next time in real person after COVID, and make together a better energy world and a better world. Thank you so much, and see you next time.